What's going on, guys? Tower number 9 here, and welcome back to the Saturday spoiler review. This is our second installment, and we're going to be going over all the cards previewed in the last week for Star Wars Unlimited TCG's third set, Twilight of the Republic. And we have quite a few to get through because there was another live stream where they showed quite a lot of cards in addition to the normal content creator previews. Let's get started. So first up, we have the Clone Wars. This is a 2-cost command event. It has the Disaster trait. Pay any number of resources, create that many clone trooper tokens. Each opponent creates that many battle droid tokens. This is an interesting card to me because so it costs a significant amount of resources to get a big result. So if you paid 2, it actually doesn't do anything because you then have 0 resources to spend on the actual clone troopers and battle droids. So if you were to spend 3, you would get 1, which isn't very good. 3 for a 2/2, and it gives your opponent something pretty bad. 4, though, now you're getting 2 2/2s. 5, you're getting 3, and so it really scales a lot with resources, kind of similar to an X cost card in Magic the Gathering. But it also gives your opponent a bunch of battle droids, which is potentially a big downside. So let's say you give your opponent a bunch of battle droids, then they defeat a bunch of those battle droids to play a powerful unit with exploit, and you might be like, I wish I hadn't done that. But I think where this card is going to really shine is if you have some setup that allows you to pair it with an area of effect type attack that does damage to a bunch of different units, or some kind of one-sided wipe or debuff effect that makes those battle droids irrelevant. So one thing that someone brought up in the comments on my YouTube short was if you have Snoke in play, you can play this, make a bunch of clone troopers, your opponent gets a bunch of battle droids, but Snoke's passive ability kills them all immediately, so you're only getting the upside and not the downside. And I think insofar as you can do something like that, this is going to be a pretty strong card, but in some situations it's going to be very risky or double-edged, depending on what your opponent might be running. Okay, let's move on to our next card. Sabine Ren, You Can Count on Me. This is a new version of Sabine. So it is a 4-cost Cunning Heroism ground unit from I believe this is Sabine circa the Ahsoka show, maybe. She has that lightsaber. She no longer has the Rebel trait. She's Fringe, Mandalorian, and Spectre. She is a 4/4. While this unit is exhausted, she can't be attacked unless she gains Sentinel. And on attack, you may discard a card from your deck. If it doesn't share an aspect with your base, deal 2 damage to a ground unit. So this version of Sabine is interesting. Like our Sabine Ren Explosives artist, she has an ability that makes it so that under some circumstances the opponent can't attack her. Though in this case, that is linked to her being exhausted instead of aspects on other cards that you have in play. 4 for a 4/4 isn't a great stat line, but the fact that when you play her, your opponent can't attack her because she's exhausted is going to protect her from a lot of stuff that would otherwise be a problem. The on-attack ability here is inconsistent but strong when it works, and I think you're going to be able to build around it. So if you make a deck where, you can potentially build a deck where you have a lot of cards that don't share aspects with your base and make this more reliable, or you could just say, hey, this is a May ability, I might not do it. And it also pairs well with cards like R2-D2, which let you look at the top card of your deck. So you can get that advanced knowledge as to whether or not the card on the top of your deck is going to work with the ability or not, and then just decline to use it. Similarly, it works well with Ezra's ability, perhaps fittingly, where if you looked at your top card with Ezra and chose to leave it on top, then you no longer have a element of chance with Sabine's ability. So overall, the stats aren't great for cost, but and the second ability is not consistent, but the first ability does provide her some relevant cover to make it easier for her to get a chance to attack, and the second ability can be pretty strong when it works and does have some combos and synergies that you can do to make it more consistent. I don't think she's totally amazing, but I think she could end up being a strong card, especially if people kind of build around these abilities. So hard to say exactly where she'll end up, but it's interesting. And it is also worth noting she is another Spectre. So all those Hera Syndulla leader fans can rest easy that they now have another card to add to their ensemble there. All right, let's go to our next card, Captain Typho Protecting the Senator. A 3-cost 2/4 Naboo Republic Trooper unit in Vigilance Heroism. When played and on attack, give a unit Sentinel for this phase. And this was previewed by Main Deck. I am going to try and link to the original preview videos for all the content creator previews. My apologies if I don't mention every content creator on the page, but I will try to do so, and I will put links in the video description below so you can see their takes on things too, which might well be better than mine, hard to say. So Captain Typho protecting the Senator. This is not really something that thrills me, because these sorts of 3-cost 2/4 conditional Sentinel cards, I'm not loving it. I'm not loving it. And maybe I'm just a hater. But to me, I don't really know why I would play something like this. There is some flexibility, so you can potentially play him and use his ability to give a space unit Sentinel or give a really strong unit Sentinel. But the stats aren't good for the cost, and I would rather just have a reliable Sentinel. And there are several units that are 3-cost 2/4 conditional Sentinels, and it is worth noting that there's also Cloud City Wingard. Cloud City Wingard is a 3-cost 2/4 unconditional Sentinel, and Cloud City Wingard is normally not considered good enough to actually see play. So it's hard for me to get excited about 3-cost 2/4 conditional Sentinel units when a 3-cost 2/4 unconditional Sentinel exists and is generally considered bad. I could be wrong. Maybe the flexibility that Captain Typho has to offer with respect to giving a different unit Sentinel or giving a space unit Sentinel, maybe that makes him worth it, but right now I'm not very enthusiastic. I really wish this guy had maybe a 3/4 stat line instead. That would make me a lot more excited. All right, let's take a look at our next card here. This is going to be the 501st Liberator, a 3-cost 3/3 command ground unit with the Republic clone and trooper traits. When played, if you control another Republic unit, you may heal 3 damage from a base. This was previewed by Alliance Dispatch. So 3 for a 3/3 is pretty bad stats for cost, but 3 for a 3/3 is still played sometimes if the ability is good enough. So in particular, Fleet Lieutenant sees a lot of play because that ability is really good despite 3 for a 3/3 being below the curve. And the 501st Liberator, I don't quite think the ability's at that Fleet Lieutenant level where you're going to be hyped enough about the conditional heal here to run this card. To run this card despite the stat inefficiency. It doesn't, I don't know, maybe if we see really good Republic or clone synergies that really take this to the next level. As it stands, I think this is going to be more one for the limited environment. It isn't terrible. If you have that other Republic unit when you play it and you get to heal for 3, that's a solid benefit, at least in some situations, but I'm not sure that this stat line is going to be worth these resources in Constructed, and I think it probably won't. All right, moving to our next card, the Relentless Rocket Droid. This is a 4-cost aggression ground unit. It is a 3/5 with the Separatist Droid and Trooper traits, and while you control another Trooper unit, this unit gets +2 power. Yeah, so this is an interesting one. So 4 for a 3/5 is below the curve. You're typically looking for 9 points of stats on a 4-cost unit, so a 4-cost 4/5 would be on curve. But 4 for a 3/5 may be below curve, but while you control another trooper unit, this unit gets +2 power. Now it's 4 for a 5/5, which is above curve. So basically, this unit is a bit inefficient if you don't have another trooper, and it's extra efficient if you do have another trooper. I honestly think this is pretty solid. It's worth noting that both the clone trooper and battle droid token units do have the trooper trait, and as a result of that, I'm not sure that it's going to be so hard to get this unit the buffed stat line, get up to 5/5, and really start causing some problems for opponents. So I'm not sure that something like this is at a constructed power level. At 4 cost starts to be the time when you worry a bit about things with no guaranteed impact and so on. But at the same time, 4 for a 5/5 is pretty good. 4 for a 5/5 is pretty good. So I think this is going to be quite a strong card in limited, and I think it may well see some constructed play too, depending on how things go. Next up is Heavy Staunch Martyr, 4-cost aggression ground unit, 4/4 with the Republic clone and trooper traits. Coordinate Raid 2, gain this keyword while you control 3 or more units. This unit gets +2 power while attacking, and when defeated, deal 1 damage to each enemy ground unit. I think heavy is going to be really good. So 4 for a 4/4, as I was mentioning earlier, a bit below the curve, 8 points of stats instead of 9. But Coordinate Raid 2 allows you to potentially hit for 6. And when defeated, dealing 1 damage to each enemy ground unit seems really good in a set where 1/1 token units are a major mechanic. It's not going to be good in every matchup. You know, sometimes you're going to play against someone who has a space-focused deck or has only tougher ground units, doesn't run shields, but I think this is going to be good enough that I suspect this guy is going to be a common sight. It is also worth noting that if you have Coordinate enabled, so you have 3 or more units, including Heavy himself, and you ambush him in, he can actually kill a 4/7 leader in one hit. So what you can do there is if you use Energy Conversion Lab to ambush him in, you have your 2 other units. He swings in. He has 4 base attack. It goes up to 6 thanks to Raid 2. And then he also is defeated in this conflict. And then he does 1 damage to each enemy ground unit. And that 1 damage removes the enemy leader. So I think Heavy is I think Heavy's going to be a pretty... I think he's going to be a powerful card and one that you'll see a fair bit of. Might end up being a bit sideboardy, you know, we'll have to see. But I think I think we're going to see a fair amount of Heavy once set 3 drops. All right. Next up is Soulless 1, customized for Grievous. This is a 1-cost Cunning Villainy space unit. It is a 1/2 with the Separatist Vehicle and Fighter traits. On attack, you may exhaust a friendly droid unit or General Grievous, leader or unit. If you do, this unit gets +2 power for this attack. So Soulless 1 here, it's an interesting card. It's basically a 1-cost It's basically a 1-cost fighter that can be a 3/2 on offense at least, and 3/2 in space is a good stat line and normally would cost 2. So this is a discounted 3/2, but it does come at the cost of exhausting a friendly droid unit or Grievous leader or unit to get that, and it doesn't have those stats on defense. I tend to think this is probably going to end up being good. Other 3/2 units in space have been strong even with the downside, so Mercenary Gunship, for instance, is quite a solid card and has seen a fair amount of play, despite even being a generic. It is a 2-cost 3/2 with a downside, but it's still good enough to see play. And I think that this one, which can basically function as a 1-cost 3/2 with a downside, is going to be probably relevant as well, though we'll have to see. And, you know, if you're not planning on using Grievous's leader ability in a turn, why not exhaust him to give bonus stats? Or why not send in a 1/1 battle droid and have that exhaust to buff up this swing? You know, seems like it could be worth it, especially in terms of action economy, where having a lot of small units tends to be bad. Having the ability to exhaust one of them to essentially get an attack bonus on something else seems like it could be an interesting play. So, you know, overall, not the biggest, most dramatic unit, but one that I do think has a role to play, and also one that shows an interesting design space with respect to cards that exhaust your leader as a cost. I think that's a very cool space, and we'll have to see what they do with it. Next up, we have Padme Amidala serving the Republic. So she is a command heroism leader. She has, on her leader side, she has Coordinate as an action. Spend 1 and exhaust to search the top 3 cards of your deck for a Republic card, reveal it, and draw it. And she deploys on 5 resources as a 2/7 with Restore 1 and Coordinate on attack. Search the top 3 cards of your deck for a Republic card, reveal it, and draw it. And she has the Naboo Republic and official traits. I tend to think I'm skeptical. So there are 2 existing leaders that have this sort of dynamic where they have a 1-cost ability to conditionally draw a card on their leader side, and they have the same ability but for free on attack on their unit side, and those would be Cassian Andor and Hunter. And both Cassian Andor and Hunter see very little competitive play right now. I think that in general that sort of ability is just not really considered worth it, but Padme has a few characteristics that make me a bit more optimistic about her than I am about the other 2. So first off, Padme doesn't just draw 1 card like Cassian does, and doesn't Hunter has an ability that isn't technically drawing a card, but you know, it's complicated. But Padme gets to search the top 3 cards of her deck for a Republic card. And sometimes this might blank out, which would be really unfortunate, but I'm assuming that you have a Republic focused deck. And Padme's ability is probably going to be better than just drawing a card a bunch of the time, because you'll have multiple cards to choose from and you can choose the one that's more appropriate for the scenario. Additionally, I think that Padme 2/7 isn't the greatest stat line for a leader, but a fair few people have been playing Tarkin recently and he's a 2/7. And Krennic is a 2/7 and was at one time very competitive. I think a lot of people have swapped over to Kira recently, but the 2/7 stat line isn't a total joke. And I think that if you have a coordinate focused deck, which again Padme wants to do, having a 2/7 leader might be a good asset for that, because it's sort of annoying for opponents to remove just because that's a lot of HP on a unit that isn't necessarily the most combat relevant. But if they don't remove Padme, she's a unit sitting there and acting towards your coordinate count, as well as a potential source of healing on base and card draw. So I don't know. I think I'm cautiously optimistic on Padme. I think that the outside view, just reference class forecasting, says that she will probably not do great, simply because Cassian and Hunter with similar abilities have both been kind of marginalized competitively. But I think she has some elements that make me more hopeful than that outside view will suggest, and we'll have to see how she does. Okay. Next up, Droid Manufactory. This is a new base. It is a 24 HP command base. So you have 1 less HP than Energy Conversion Lab and 6 less HP than a generic base. But when you deploy a leader, create 2 battle droid tokens. So battle droid tokens are 1/1s, and they are villainy units, and they have the droid trooper separatist traits, I believe. Yeah, okay, so this is a really interesting one. So creating 2 1/1 units is probably not in itself worth losing 6 HP on your base. You would have to swing with each of those units 3 times in principle to make up 6 HP, and I think that's not that realistic. That's sort of a crude measure, but anyway, I think where this is going to be more effective though is situations where, let's say that your leader has coordinate. You have the droid manufacturer as your base. Now, when you deploy your leader automatically has coordinate enabled, because you just sent in 2 battle droids, and you have the leader unit and the 2 battle droid tokens. That's 3 units, coordinates on. Let's say that you have exploit. Once you deploy your leader, you have 2 1/1s that you can sacrifice for exploit and bring in more powerful cards. I think that there might also be decks that have some other bonus or synergy for droids. Maybe you're playing IG-88. I personally wouldn't play IG-88, but maybe you're playing IG-88 and you want to bring out more units for outnumbering and for raid. You could totally do that there. I think that it'll be interesting to see how much play this sees. There is, of course, the big downside of not playing Energy Conversion Lab, which is one of the best cards in the game, and which actually has 1 more HP than the droid manufactory. So will this end up being a big deal? I'm not sure, but I'm not ready to write it off either, because of its synergies with coordinate and exploit in particular, as well as other stuff that might benefit from number of units, from battle droid synergies, and so on. So we'll have to see how this one does. Next up, we have Tranquility Inspiring Flagship. This is a 7 cost, 7/6 Republic Vehicle Capital Ship. When played, you may return a Republic unit from your discard pile to your hand, and on attack, each of the 3 Republic cards you play this phase costs 1 less. It is a heroism space unit. And this was previewed by the Tabletop Misfits. So I don't love it because it's an expensive card that doesn't have immediate board impact. So you can play it, and it's a powerful unit, and you can get a unit from your discard pile to your hand, and if it gets a chance to attack, it can potentially provide a nice discount that allows you to get more Republic units on the board, which can potentially help you enable coordinate. When paired with the fact that it brings a unit back, it can help you sort of flood the board. That seems cool to me, don't get me wrong, but there isn't a huge immediate impact. And I compare this kind of to Home 1, which allows you to not just return a unit to hand, but rather return a unit to play and at a discount. And I also probably like Home 1's Restore and Restore buff more than I like Tranquility's on attack ability. And to be fair, Home 1 costs 8 and has 2 aspects, and Tranquility costs 7 and has just the 1. But I'm not really thrilled by Tranquility in its present state. We'll have to see how it does, but I wouldn't be surprised if this doesn't see a ton of competitive play, at least in Constructed. I do think it's probably a menace in Limited just by being a big, tough unit that also lets you get another good unit that you had from discard to hand, assuming the game goes that long. Next up, we have the Wartime Trade Official. This is a very basic sort of unit. 2-cost Vigilance Villainy Ground unit, 1/3 with the Separatist and Official traits, and when it's defeated, you create a Battle Droid token. Pretty simple. Now, is that worth it? Well, I think that, so one advantage of a card like this, so it has below curve stats, but if you consider the stats of the battle droid that you get when it's defeated, it ends up being above curve, and there are some situations where this will be synergistic. So for example, if you play a card with exploit, you can defeat the Wartime Trade Official and it replaces itself with a battle droid. When defeated, effects are good with exploit. It's an official, so it enables Emperor's Royal Guard. Let's say that you're playing, a blue-green villainy deck, and you want to have Emperor's Royal Guard going. This guy can be a turn 1 play that enables that, and if the opponent deals with him somehow, you get some extra value. Overall, I don't think this is a really flashy card, but it might well be one that sees some play depending on how strong the relevant synergies are, what we see for Separatists, how many decks are built around exploit, whether there's better options to do the same thing, and so on. Calculating Magnard is our next card. This is a 3-cost Vigilance Villainy Ground unit. It is a 3/4 with the Separatist and Droid traits. When played and when a friendly unit is defeated, this unit gains Sentinel for the phase. And to me, this unit's indicative of a big difference. So earlier I was complaining about how I thought 2/4 conditional Sentinels weren't very good. This is a 3/4 conditional Sentinel, and in my opinion, that's a big difference. So playing a 3-cost 3/4 isn't terrible stats for cost. I know there have been a lot of 3-cost 3/5s recently, and that does make it so that the 3-cost 3/4 is less appealing, but the 3-cost 3/4 stat line isn't horrible. And it does get Sentinel just for being played, and then if a friendly unit is defeated, it gains Sentinel to protect other units. And keep in mind that I believe this works if you defeat your own unit. So let's say you play the Calculating Magnard, and let's say turn 1, you played, I don't know, something that gave you a battle droid token or 2. Turn 2, you play a Calculating Magnard. Turn 3, you sacrifice one of those battle droids that you had with exploit to bring out a powerful unit. And now, because one of your units was defeated by your own exploit, the Calculating Magnard is a Sentinel again. So overall, I think this is, I'm not sure this is at a constructed power level, but I think it will very likely be a strong card in Limited, and it might even see some constructed play depending on how strong the relevant synergies and so on are. Next up, we have the Outspoken Representative, which was previewed by Spice Squadron. This is a 2-cost Vigilance Heroism ground unit. It is a 0/3 with the Republic and Official traits, and while you control another Republic unit, this unit gains Sentinel. Units in this arena can't attack your non-Sentinel units or your base. When defeated, you create a Clone Trooper token. So to me, this strikes me as kind of a better version of that trade representative that we saw earlier, who was a 1/3 that gave a battle droid when defeated. Being a 0/3 with conditional Sentinel that creates a Clone Trooper when defeated seems better to me, because a Clone Trooper is a 2/2, while a battle droid is just a 1/1, and a 0/3 with conditional Sentinel is probably better than a 1/3 in my book. Now you do have to control another Republic unit to give this unit Sentinel, and this is also going to be ambush bait. So if you play this and your opponent ambushes it with a Cloud Rider or something, you're probably not very happy. But you know what? If they ambush it and take it out for free, well, you got a Clone Trooper that can potentially trade with their ambush unit. So I think this is going to be pretty solid and pretty annoying for opponents, but we'll have to see. Next up, we have the Magnard Wing Leader. This is a 3-cost Command Villainy Space unit. It is a 3/4 with the Separatist Vehicle and Fighter traits. Action, attack with a droid unit, then attack with another droid unit. Use this ability only once each round. And it's important to note, the Magnard Wing Leader is not itself a droid, despite Magnagards being droids. I don't know exactly what's up with that. A local player had hypothesized that this was because the ship itself was not a droid fighter. It was a droid piloting a normal fighter. That might be true. I don't know exactly how that works. But Anyway, the ability doesn't work on itself, but I think this is going to be quite a strong card. Anyway, 3 cost for 3/4 in space is a very competitive stat line. That's a strong stat line. And the ability here is going to be quite relevant. Even if it can't be used on itself, there are going to be some situations where this will allow you to do a strong play, similar to Leia's ability, Leia's leader ability, which of course works with rebels instead of droids. But that ability can be really good in the right circumstance. Action compression can be really powerful. And so I think this could end up being quite a strong card, both for its base stats and for the ability being quite good if you have a bunch of droids on the field. I mentioned earlier that having a lot of units tends to be negative for getting the initiative, and this is another card that can help mitigate that. So overall, pretty optimistic on the Magnard Wing Leader. Kalani, Analytical General, 6 cost command villainy ground unit, 5/7, separatist and droid traits. On attack, you may choose another unit. If you have the initiative, you may choose up to 2 other units instead, and give each chosen unit +2/+2 for this phase. This is one of these cards where his ability does seem cool, but I'm actually skeptical of this guy because he is a 6 cost unit with no immediate board impact. 6 for a 5/7 is an okay stat line, but not great. The on attack ability here is... it's fine. I'm not saying it's bad. In the best situation, you get +4/+4 in total, which is pretty sweet. But he doesn't do anything when you first play him. His stats aren't so amazing that it's awesome just to play him for stats. And his ability only works on other units, so he can't buff himself to hit for 7, which would make him substantially more relevant, as it would allow him to potentially take out leaders when being ambushed in. There are a lot of leaders with 6 or 7 HP that would be vulnerable to Kalani if he could target himself. But unfortunately, he can't, and I don't think the total package is quite going to be good enough for him to see a lot of play. Could be wrong. I think it's a cool idea for a card, but I'm not quite seeing it in its current state. Series Officer. This is a 2 cost aggression villainy ground unit. It is a 2/1, and when defeated, deal 2 damage to a base. It has the separatist and droid traits. This is a cool unit, so it has kind of a basic stat line. 2 for a 2/1 is below curve, but when the opponent defeats it, I said when the opponent defeats it. It's not when the opponent defeats it. It's just when it is defeated, which could be by your own exploit or whatever. It deals 2 damage to a base. So you get a pretty basic unit, and your opponent can likely deal with it one way or another. But the downside is, even if they deal with it, it's still going to put some damage on their base. Good for an aggro style of deck. And could be a solid bit player in that type of deck. I think that things that damage the base directly can be really handy for aggro play, because they allow you to get some results even if your opponent has stabilized or taken control of the board, and that's one of the things that makes Sabine so good. Next up, we have Squadron of Vultures. This is a 6 cost aggression villainy space unit. It's a 5/4 with the separatist droid vehicle and fighter traits, and it has exploit 3. While playing this card, defeat up to 3 units you control. This card costs 2 less for each unit defeated this way. So, like many exploit cards, this is quite bad if played for its base cost. 6 for a 5/4 is really not very good. But if you use exploit 3 and play it for 0 for a 5/4 that requires you to sacrifice a few battle droids, sounds like a very different prospect. And even if you're just sacrificing 1 or 2 droids and not the full 3, you can still discount this unit quite a bit and get it into a point where it is, I think, a pretty threatening presence. So, like a lot of exploit, the question is, do you have a means of generating cheap units to use exploit with? Next up, we have the Grenade Strike. This is a 2 cost aggression event previewed by the SWU Cube. And deal 2 damage to a unit, you may deal 1 damage to another unit in the same arena. This is an interesting event. So in some sense, this is a bad Daring Raid. So Daring Raid is a very similar event where it is 1 to deal 2 damage to a unit or base. This is a really good card, to be fair, but Grenade Strike is 2 to deal 2 damage to a unit, which is less efficient, and you can't hit the base, but you can deal 1 damage to another unit in the same arena. And that's going to be the key to Grenade Strike, because sometimes Grenade Strike will give you a 2 for 1. And if you can get a 2 for 1 with this card, that's really good. So let's say, your opponent has a unit with 2 HP left and they have a battle droid token, or they have a unit with 2 HP left and they have a 3/1 stormtrooper or whatever. Grenade Strike being able to take out 2 units with 1 card can potentially be really good and make up for the inefficiency of costing 2 instead of 1 like Daring Raid. The question is just, are there going to be enough situations where the opponent has multiple small units lined up such that you can get that multi-kill with the Grenade Strike? And if you can, I think it's going to be pretty good. And if you can't, I think it's going to be inefficient compared to Daring Raid, and you probably wouldn't want to play it. We'll have to see how the meta shakes out. Next up, Rush Clovis, Banking Clan Scion, 4-cost Cunning Villainy Ground Unit. He's a 3/5 with the Separatist and Official traits. He has Raid 2, so he gets +2 power when attacking. And on attack, if the defending player controls no ready resources, create a Battle Droid token. So I think this guy is actually going to be quite strong, even though I think this on attack ability is not consistent. 4 for a 3/5 with Raid 2 is a really good stat line. So you can ambush this guy in and take out Sabine in 1 hit on the turn that she deploys. That's quite valuable. So like a Boba Fett ECL deck or something could get a lot of benefit out of something like that. And sometimes this on attack ability is going to give you free battle droids. I think it's really not going to be consistent, especially on a character with raid. So raid units often want to attack early so that the opponent doesn't attack them and take advantage of their weaker stats on defense. So I think the raid and the stats are a little anti-synergistic with the on-attack ability, but, it's better than not having the on-attack ability, and sometimes you will get some nice value in the form of free battle droid tokens from this guy. Overall, I think we're probably going to see him a fair bit. Tactical Droid Commander, 5-cost Cunning Villainy Ground Unit, 4/4 Separatist Droid, Exploit 2. When you play another Separatist unit, you may exhaust a unit that costs the same as or less than the played unit. So I think the Tactical Droid Commander is a unit that's built to synergize with Exploit. So I believe that when you play another Separatist unit, the cost is the original cost, not the cost after Exploit. So you can potentially play a powerful unit, use Exploit to sacrifice battle droids to play it cheaply, and then this guy's ability will look at the original cost, not the post-exploit cost, and allow you to exhaust a big opposing unit as well. Now that seems pretty good, but his stats are very bad for, like many exploit units, his stats are very bad for the cost. It is worth noting that he can sometimes just exhaust stuff even if you don't have exploit. Let's say you played this guy with exploit 2, you don't have any more battle droids to sacrifice, but you do have a 3-cost separatist unit. Well, you can play that and exhaust a 3-cost opposing unit. So overall, I think this guy could end up being good. The stats are not great, which give me pause, but the ability can potentially be quite annoying for an opponent, and you do have that ability to bring this guy out fast with exploit. In fact, you could play that trade representative from earlier on turn 1, and on turn 2, play this guy, sacrificing the trade representative or whatever for exploit 1. So now you have a 4/4 on turn 2, which is quite good, and you have another battle droid that gets created when that trade guy is defeated. So overall, I think the Tactical Droid Commander has some potential, and we'll have to see where it ends up. Zero the Hutt, Colorful Schemer, 5-cost 2/8 ground unit, Cunning Villainy. When played, for each opponent, you may exhaust a unit that player controls. On attack, for each opponent, you may exhaust a resource that player controls. So I think this guy is going to be so annoying for opponents. I don't know if he's going to be good, but he's going to be annoying. So 5 for a 2/8 is really bad. So first off, that stat line is below the curve. And second off, 2/8 is a bad stat distribution. So not only does he have fewer points of stats than you can get on other cards, those stats are not distributed very well. And this is not a unit that you're going to be playing for its great fighting prowess. However, these abilities are going to be so annoying, and I think that's why you play Zero the Hutt. So when played exhausting a unit that's already good, there are no conditions on it. You can exhaust a leader, you can exhaust a space unit, you can exhaust a unit that costs more than 0. Overall, I think that's going to be quite annoying. I think that's going to be quite annoying for opponents to deal with just there. And then additionally, the on-attack ability potentially exhausting resources is like even more annoying. And I think that effects that exhaust resources can be very frustrating to deal with if they make it so that you can't do the play that you were intending this turn. The best case scenario for something like this is like oh, you ambush him in and you exhaust a resource, and now the opponent only has 4 resources instead of 5. And as a result of that, now they can't play the card that they were going to play, and they don't have anything else good to play anymore either. So you basically ruin their plan for the turn. Does that always happen? No, of course not. But it happens sometimes, and I think overall this guy's going to be a very annoying unit for opponents. I don't know if it's worth playing a 5-cost unit with very bad stats, but, we'll have to see. Wartime Profiteering, 1-cost Cunning Villainy Event. Look at cards on the top of your deck equal to the number of units that were defeated this phase. Draw 1 and put the others on the bottom of your deck in a random order. This is a decent card, in my opinion. I don't think it's amazing. The problem with this that I have is, so in the ideal situation, there have been a lot of units defeated in a turn, either through a unit combat or through exploit or whatever, and that means that this gets to search quite a few cards and pick the best one, which is a useful effect. But the problem that I see with this is, first off, if units haven't been defeated this phase, it doesn't do anything, and then second off, in general, I don't feel like I need a lot of card draw in this game compared to some other card games, which makes me less excited about this sort of ability. It also doesn't actually give you card advantage because you lose this card itself. Is it total garbage? No, of course not. Is it a card that I'm really excited about? Also, no, to be honest with you. Wouldn't be surprised if it's good sometimes, but I would be surprised if it's a I don't know. Maybe something like this is good. Searching for cards can be good, but I just think it's conditional enough and the effect is marginal enough that I'm not sure it will end up being strong. Okay. On top of things, 2-cost upgrade, Cunning, +2 power. When played, attached unit can't be attacked this phase unless it has Sentinel. Not really loving this, to be honest with you. It kind of reminds me of Jetpack in terms of being an offense upgrade that also makes it so the unit is harder to remove. So if we search for Jetpack is, I believe, a 2-cost Cunning upgrade, gives +2/+0, gives you a shield token that has to be defeated at the start of the regroup phase, and then it can be smuggled out for 4. Compared to on top of things, I think I like the Jetpack more overall because it has smuggle and it does a similar thing to this, but the shield is useful when you're attacking into the enemy as well as if they want to attack you. But I don't think this will be a total garbage unplayable card, at least in limited. I think there's a fair chance this will see at least some play, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are like really annoying things that you can do with it with some kind of combos with specific units and so on, at least at some point in the future. I don't know if it's going to be now. At least presently I'm not thrilled with it, but it seems like it will be decent enough in limited and potentially some kind of combo enabler. But for like normal general play, I would probably rather play Jetpack. Count Dooku, Face of the Confederacy. This guy is a command villainy leader. As an action, you can exhaust him to play a separatist card from your hand, and it gains exploit 1. So you can defeat a unit you control, and if you do, that card costs 2 less. He deploys on 7 resources as a 5/9. That's a good stat line. He has Overwhelm when attacking an enemy unit and deal excess damage to the opponent's base. And on attack, the next separatist card you play this phase gains exploit 3. So Count Dooku is a very exploit-focused leader. A lot of the leaders in this game that have allowed you to discount something or give you some sort of resource advantage have proven to be quite good. So I think both versions of Han do this, and Boba does as well. And those leaders have done quite well, competitively speaking. I think they're, Jabba also does something like this and hasn't had as much success competitively. It's possible people just haven't figured it out, or it's possible his version is too clunky. But Dooku's version is really notable because all those other leaders discount something by 1, at least in general, or provide 1 resource in Boba's case. And Dooku can potentially provide 2 resources via exploit 1, discount something by 2. So the main thing that's interesting about his ability is that it's quite limited with respect to what you can use it on. So when Young Han came out, people were looking at all kinds of units like, oh, we can use this with Luke Skywalker. We can use this with Redemption Medical Frigate. We can bring out Obi-Wan, all these, they were looking at all these different units that you could potentially bring out a turn early. And with Count Dooku, you can potentially bring a unit out 2 turns early, but only a separatist unit. So, you know, you're not going to be able to use this to play a Vader on 5 resources. You're not going to be able to use this with a bunch of these other older units. But I think there's a good chance, you know, Separatists seem to be a major theme this set, as is fitting for the Clone Wars. So I think there's a good chance that we'll see enough good Separatists to make this ability quite strong and relevant. It is also worth noting that while other seven deployment leaders haven't been that successful, at least competitively speaking, Vader was popular for a time, but Count Dooku has better stats than them. So I believe Vader and Hunter are both 5.8s, and Count Dooku is a 5.9, so that extra point of HP gives him a little more punch. He does also have the Force, Separatist, and Sith traits. Force is one of the best traits in the game, and I think there's a good chance we're going to see some synergy with Separatist and Sith as well. So very interesting character, Count Dooku. I hope he ends up being strong. It's hard to say. Right now, seven deployment leaders aren't necessarily the most powerful or the most played, but you know, that could easily change. Let's see what's next. Droid Commando, 3-cost command villainy ground unit previewed by Rolling Solo, 4/3 with the Separatist droid and trooper traits. While you control another Separatist unit, this unit gains ambush. When you play this unit, it may ready and attack an enemy unit. I think this is like a superstar awesome card in limited, at least. I think this will be really, really, really good in limited. Will it be really, really, really good in constructed? I'm not sure, but it doesn't strike me as obviously bad. I think there are several turn 1 setups that make it very likely that you're going to control another Separatist unit. You know, you could play multiple small units. You could play that trade representative where if they kill him, you get a droid to replace it. The droid is Separatist and enables this. And against at least some units, this guy is a very strong ambush threat. So if someone has, you know, they have a starting unit that's a 2/3 or a 1/3 or a 1/4, or, you know, they play a 2/4 unit on turn 2. There's just a lot of ways that this guy can cause trouble for an opponent, and I think he will end up likely seeing a lot of play in limited, especially at common. I think this guy is awesome, and in constructed, I think he might well be relevant as well, at least for Separatist decks. Kind of a scary threat. Ambush is a very good keyword. All right, next up is the Vanguard droid bomber, also previewed by Rolling Solo, 2-cost aggression space unit. Separatist droid vehicle and fighter traits, and it is a 2/2. When played, if you control another Separatist unit, deal 2 damage to an enemy base. So 2 for a 2/2 in space is a poor stat line. We can compare it to cards like Alliance X-Wing, which is 2 for a 2/3 in space and not even particularly good. Restored Arc is a 2 for a 2/3 in space, and it has Restore 1. So 2 for a 2/2 in space is below the curve. But this when played ability allows you to get automatic damage to the opponent's base in some situations. Now, I'm a little more pessimistic about this one than some others because I think that these sorts of guaranteed damage to base abilities are often best in situations where you've lost control. Like you're an aggro deck and your opponent has the board. And in those sorts of situations, I'm not sure that you're going to be that likely to control another Separatist unit. On the other hand, you know, let's say turn 1 you play a Separatist unit, turn 2 you play this and do something else for 1. Free damage to the opponent's base is not bad, especially for an aggro deck. I don't think it's like horrendous, but I do think there's a bit of anti-synergy there with an ability that does burn damage directly to the base, but also requires you to already have a board to some degree, because I do think those burn abilities are most valuable when you've lost control of the board. And, you know, we'll have to see. Right now, I'm not super optimistic about this, but it is also worth noting that this is an aggro deck, or I'm sorry, this is an aggro card. That seems suited for villainy in particular, though, you know, maybe there's going to be enough non-villainy Separatists. You could put this into some kind of heroism aggro build. And I think that's cool because right now, most aggro decks, not all, you know, you have stuff like Kylo, but most aggro decks are heroism. And I think it's going to be cool to see some of that on the villainy side as well. Okay. Next up, we have the Invisible Hand Imposing Flagship. This was actually previewed on my own channel. I did a much longer video going into detail on this, but it is an 8-cost, or it's not going to be, you know, longer at least than the brief time that we'll have with this card here. It is an 8-cost villainy space unit, and 4/7 with the Separatist vehicle and capital ship traits. 4/7 for 8 is a very, very bad stat line, but when played, create 4 battle droid tokens. So if you add those up, you end up actually being an 11 total stats for 8, which is quite good. And on attack, exhaust any number of friendly Separatist units, deal 1 damage to the defending player's base for each unit exhausted this way. That's a very cool ability. So if you have a huge board of battle droids, you can attack with Invisible Hand, exhaust all your battle droids to deal 1 damage to the enemy base for each. And not only do you save a bunch of actions, you also set up a scenario where now you've already used those battle droids and can feel free to exploit them to play other cards. I think the Invisible Hand is especially exciting for Count Dooku because he will be able to use exploit both to potentially play this faster, and then also the 4 battle droid tokens that it creates gives him a lot of ammo to play other stuff with exploit, and potentially really put the pressure on the opponent. So overall, I think this is going to be an interesting card. It definitely seems like something that will do best when it's making a lot of use of exploit, or maybe even some coordinate cards that a villainy deck is still playing, can be an instant enabler for those and be difficult to deal with. But watch out for area of effect damage and for Snoke and other things that might be able to suppress those battle droids, because without the droid tokens, this unit's stats are not all that good. But with them, it is, I think, kind of menacing. And, it is worth noting also, this isn't a card that has a huge immediate board impact, but I think the battle droids that it creates can kind of be their own board impact by being additional resources for you with exploit or enablers of other effects. So I am more optimistic about this than about Vigilance, the heroism ship that we saw earlier. So let's see what's next. I have the high ground, 1 cost event. Choose a friendly unit. Each enemy unit gets -4/-0 while attacking that unit this phase, and it is a vigilance card. So this is kind of a reverse version of the disarm effect. Disarm, also seen on Jeddah City, give an enemy unit -4 for the phase. Jeddah City is the same thing, but it is non-leader unit, I believe. So I have the high ground is like the reverse version, where it is protecting your unit from anyone who attacks it instead of debuffing an enemy unit. I think this is going to go best with a Sentinel, especially a Sentinel that's difficult to deal with other cards. And I think for that reason, maybe the most fitting card to use with I have the high ground is actually Leader Obi-Wan. So if you look at Obi-Wan Kenobi, leader version here, Obi-Wan Kenobi Patient Mentor, when you deploy him, he is a 4/7 Sentinel. And so if you deploy Obi-Wan and then you play I have the high ground on him, well, all their ground units have to attack him because of a Sentinel, unless you have another Sentinel out there. And additionally, if they swing into him, they get -4 power, so they're barely going to do any damage. That can be a huge obstacle. You can, of course, also use it on other cards, either a unit that you want to protect, or maybe you use it on a Sentinel and they have to attack into it. But it is worth noting that I think it will be best on a leader, because leaders are not subject to as many removal options. So like you could play this on a normal Sentinel and then the opponent just bounces it with Waylay or whatever, and you're like, oh, rip. So I think it is going to be best with a leader Sentinel, or a Sentinel that's somehow resistant or immune to removal cards. I don't know what exactly that would be, but this is a very, very cool card, and it's thematic that it works well with Obi-Wan. Now, will it see a lot of play? I don't know. It is a pretty specific sort of effect, but it does seem like something that could be really annoying to deal with in the right circumstance. Next up, the Confederate Courier, 2 cost command villainy space unit, 2/1 separatist vehicle fighter. When defeated, create a battle droid token. Well, 2 for a 2/1, not a great stat line, but when defeated, create a battle droid token. Fine by me. And you can throw this out there and maybe put some pressure on the opponent. And when it is defeated, you get that battle droid token. You can either defeat it yourself, or you can either defeat it yourself via exploit, or you can wait for your opponent to deal with it, or swing it into an opposing ship to get it defeated or whatever. I think similar to the trade representative card from earlier, this is going to be a card that allows you to have a reliable unit on the board even if the first one gets dealt with. Would you rather have a 1/3 ground or a 2/1 space? I probably lean towards 2/1 space unless you're getting benefit out of the official trait on the 1/3 ground version. But the 1/3 ground version can also swing into opposing battle droids and clear them, so maybe it is better. I don't know. We'll have to see what the meta ends up looking like in terms of stats and what units are common. But I think this could definitely end up seeing some play. This was previewed, by the way, by the Jade Throne podcast, which I am familiar with from the old L5R days, and they are now doing some coverage for Star Wars Unlimited, so pretty sweet. All right, and then last but not least for today's video, we have Imada. My apologies if I pronounced that wrong. Vice Chair. a 2-cost double command ground unit. He is a 0/4 Republic official. When you play another unit, you may exhaust this unit. If you do, search the top 4 cards of your deck for a unit, reveal it, and draw it. Put the other cards in the bottom of your deck in a random order. This was previewed by Outmaneuver. So I think basically this guy is a card advantage piece. You put him on the board. He's a 0/4, so he doesn't really do a lot in fighting unless you buff him somehow, but your opponent might well want to try and deal with him because otherwise, so units are probably the most common type of card that's played, and this guy can potentially generate a lot of card advantage over the course of a game, or you keep playing units, and each time you play a unit, he searches up another unit. So it could be a lot of card advantage here. I think this could end up being an annoying card. Now again, draw doesn't matter as much in this game as it does in some other games. So, you know, this is not a card that strikes me as being totally insane, but it's also not even just draw, it's search. So you get to search the top 4 for the best unit there, or for the current situation. I don't know. I'm optimistic about this guy. And it's cool too, because I think Double Command has not always had the best cards. I think Double Command probably has the worst double aspect cards of any of the 4 neutral aspects. But, you know, this looks like it might be changing things a bit. I could see this guy being a big problem for opponents. He has the Republic trait, which has some relevance, and he has the official trait, which also has some relevance. You know, put this guy in a Palpatine double green deck. He play him on the first turn. Turn 2, play that Emperor's Royal Guard. Now, not only do you get to exhaust this guy and search up another unit, but he's an official, so that Emperor's Royal Guard now gains Sentinel. Seems real good to me. All right. So that was the Saturday spoiler review for the second week of preview season here. And yeah, we're gonna keep doing these and going over the cards that have been shown each week. So thanks to y'all for watching, and we'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. I will catch you guys later.